when you're looking at the consumer world, and I think AI started with that, it seems easy, right? The reality is that in enterprises, it's very different. It's not about having someone even sometimes talking to the AI. It's about automating entire business processes. You can do nice demos quite quickly. There's no option of just doing just a nice demo and just getting away. So it's actually, you need to think about how it's going to work in production from day one. And then you define thresholds of what's acceptable or not, because it's always going to fail. Creating evaluation changes a bit how you're thinking about specifications. It's not a mock-up. It's, okay, this is the kind of tone I want, this is the kind of behavior I'm looking for. So you need to think about not over-engineering things at that layer when the science is actually going to fix it.
Bonjour and welcome to the French Product. When people talk about Mistral, they often talk about the big picture. Frontier models, open source, and the idea of competing with the biggest labs in the world. But today, I really want to talk about something different, because behind the vision, there's a much harder product question. How do you actually turn frontier AI into something people can use? Not just a model, not just a demo, not just a chatbot that looks impressive for 5 minutes, but a real product. Something that developers can build with, something that teams can adopt inside a company, something that enterprises can trust, govern, customize, and deploy in their own reality. And that's exactly why I'm very excited about this conversation. Elisa Salamanca leads product at Mistral. Before that, she built her career around complex products and user experience problems, notably in the data and AI space. So she brings a very interesting perspective, not just what can the technology do, but how can you make it useful, usable, and valuable for real users. And that matters because Mistral is no longer about models. It's becoming a full product stack with agents, workflows, enterprise tool, custom model adaptation, and product that need to work in some of the most demanding environments in the world. So today I want to understand what product management looks like when the product is not just software, it's a model, it's an interface, it's infrastructure, it's governance, and sometimes it's a completely new way of working. So we'll talk about what separates an impressive AI demo from real product value, how you build trust when the technology is probabilistic, and what it actually feels like to lead product inside one of the most ambitious AI companies out there. So Elisa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.
You didn't come up from the classic, I just shipped a chatbot and then I joined an AI lab path. So what in your previous product experience shaped the way that you see AI products today?
Yes, I think I don't really have, I would say, the standard background for a tech product manager. I actually started my career in the public sector. Mm-hmm. And I think the most relevant experience there was when I was working in Europe's biggest public hospital, so the Paris Hospital APHP. And I think it's relevant for what came next because there I was leading data and digital innovation. Essentially, we were trying to build like the biggest data warehouse, collecting all these raw and dirty data from medical records, mm-hmm. from patients that were coming at the hospital every day. And with that data, kind of creating models, creating value, creating innovation. And that's where I actually saw what it takes to transform data into something useful, into something that is almost life and death. Because what we were trying to do with researchers and doctors was, getting to that next level of how do you get to prediction medicine. Yeah. And so this was, I guess, the beginning of me like starting to build data products or AI products for the medical space. I then joined Dataiku, which is a data science platform. And I think I occupied different roles there. Mm-hmm. I led UX kind of oriented topics. The objective of Dataiku and what I was trying to achieve there was to make data science or machine learning, deep learning technology available to a wider population. So kind of democratizing AI in that mm-hmm. sense. At the time, generative AI was just at the very beginning. We were talking about NLP. But the main focus there was, okay, how can you make that technology in a way that is kind of covering business users, knowledge workers, mm-hmm. And transforming how AI was used in an everyday manner in large corporations. I then went into a very smaller scale-up mm-hmm. where we were building for very large enterprises in the defense sector, in the aerospace sector. So again, I would say complex industrial environments. Again, seeing how you could transform supply chain problems with data related products. And then I joined Mistral. And I think that the journey that I've seen for the past year and a half or so has been extraordinary. I mean, we just announced a big launch last week. We had our first summit with more than around 2,000 people. I mean, Mistral's journey from being this, model provider or model lab in 2023 to what it has become today, like building this full stack AI platform, I think has been an amazing journey.
Nice. This is it's funny because you've worked in very big, high stakes environments, as you said, hospitals, enterprise. And so, what did that teach you that's actually useful right now at Mistral?
Yeah, well, first of all, as I was mentioning, I was a lot in the public sector at the beginning of my career, and Mistral is really positioned as the European actor. Sovereignty control is kind of core to the value proposition that we have. And I think that having worked in a European hospital where we were building data infrastructure in a moment where there were no real alternative out there beyond the hyperscalers, sovereignty was kind of a key element for us. It was a key element for the physicians that were working at the hospital. How do we trust an actor to actually get that data that is very sensitive from millions of patients? So this kind of the governance around these problems, the sovereignty required to actually do that. How do you build an ecosystem? We were working with other European hospitals to try to kind of create momentum around these types of problems. Was something that I was kind of working with every day. So I think that I understand deeply why sovereignty, why being able to control things are core to data and AI related topics. And then I was working in the CIO office, so I was leading a data and digital innovation team. And so, I mean, problems that we were facing every day were about, production, infrastructure. How do you actually make AI-related products production ready? How do you include this into the workflow of a medical doctor? How do you include this into patient journeys? And it's really kind of a hard problems, like integrating into these systems that are sometimes very legacy systems. How do you connect to that data? This was probably the most painful, problems that we were having to solve. Like there's so much data, but it's almost unavailable. So you had to really go in deep dive into that. I guess this kind of really taught me what it is to work in an enterprise. Like what are the real problems that you're going to face, even if you have the best intentions and you want to go quick. What is blocking you? How do you create decision in a structure that's more than 100,000 people? So understanding these mechanics kind of from firsthand really helps me understand now with the customers that we work with, the main blockers or the main frictions that we can see and the problems that they're facing as well. So a public hospital is not like any enterprise. We can understand that a lot of other enterprises are more mature on the IT on the IT problems that they have. But still, once I went at Dataiku and I worked with a lot of different corporations all over the world, some were really, really advanced, but I was still seeing similar topics, which is, well, you still need to have adoption at large scale. What the people are not all AI native people. You still have governance problems. I mean, things can be very, very regulated or very sensitive, and you need to go through all these layers of validation and approval. So I think that being able to experience it firsthand in a hospital and then seeing how this kind of was similar in other domains, in other types of organizations, gave me this picture of, okay, large enterprises, large structures, from the public sector to the private sector, from hyper-regulated industries to less regulated industries, have actually a lot of similar concerns. And when they're trying to adopt a technology that is powerful, well, there's many frictions that you need to think about. And so I come at Mistral with like this, I would say, first-hand experience on, okay, how data can be used to kind of create AI-related technologies. And with that prism of, okay, but how is it hard and how do we actually help enterprises adopt it or kind of really bring that value to them?
One thing I want to understand also is, as a product person, is there anything that you had to unlearn when you moved to Frontier AI, where, like the underlying capability changes almost every few months?
Yes, I think working in the public sector, you know that I knew that a PHP or whatever hospital was going to be there in the next 50 years, right? So you actually have a long time horizons in front of you. You can plan ahead. You can think about how you can start something today that would actually get some results in 3 years, because sometimes these projects are really massive. I don't know, transforming how genetics is done in 39 hospitals is something that takes time. So my mindset was around, 5-year. I wasn't doing 5-year roadmaps, but I was like, this is what the horizon I had in mind is like. This transformation is actually going to take that amount of time, and then going to other like scale ups. Time horizon shrinks, right? Like you're not thinking 5 years ahead. You're thinking about, okay, what do we do this year? What's our plan for the product in the next 6 to 12 months? And you could, because again, the technology shifts, the momentum happening was around that time scale. Things were not going to change overnight. But with AI, things are moving so quickly. What was true 6 months ago is not true today. And so it doesn't even make sense to do a 6-month roadmap. You actually need to think, okay, what I'm going to ship in the next 2 to 3 months, have some ideas of where you want to take the product. And so you have to question yourself all the time. And I think this is like a gymnastic that you need to change when you're used to planning ahead and creating kind of a longer term vision. You actually have to have that vision, because for Mistral, it's clear we're building this full stack AI platform. We're helping enterprises kind of solve their mission critical problems with AI and transform themselves. But how you're going to get there is changing, and the power of what AI is bringing changes every month. And so you really need to adapt your thinking as like at that pace of technology evolution. I think this changes a lot when you're thinking about how you do product every day.
Focusing on the model itself, when you know that a model becomes stronger, better at something, so research, reasoning, code, multi-model understanding, how do you decide whether it becomes a visible product feature or an invisible platform capability, or something that you should not expose yet? Like, how do you decide that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll try to find some examples, because overall, like I would say that the high level directions that I would tend to say is like, we do want to make anything that the model can do available to end users in a way that is as much as possible either abstracted away from them or kind of invisible. I'm saying kind of because I think it depends the target users that you have. If you're actually bringing that technology to developers, you need to give them some level of control. And even, this is what we do at Mistral. We try to provide as much control as possible. So this is why we do open waste, etc. But taking some examples of how to think about that, you were mentioning reasoning mode. And so when reasoning arrived in the AI space, you saw either new models appear or even a think mode appear in these kind of chatbots. And so users that do not necessarily understand what that means had to kind of select think versus fast versus and it's just because that is how it worked. We couldn't do it another way. But ideally, you just don't want to expose that to the user. You just want the model to know if it has to think or not, know if it has to go quick or not, depending on the question or the task that it has to do. And so that's typically, I would say, a capability of the model that you want to abstract away from most of the end users. You might want to give that control to developers, but I would argue that even for them, having to think about how to input that level of think mode into their products, ideally they just don't have to bother about it, and it works the same way that it would work for any type of product. So that's an example where you actually do want to put it really abstracted away, but it hasn't been easy to do just because of how the models work. Another example I can think of, you were mentioning code. So if you're thinking about developers' product, it's the main thing they're using, right? The ability for models to just generate code. But when we do create other more consumer-oriented or knowledge worker-oriented things, code can be an underlying model capability that is just a means to an end. So I'm giving you an example of something that we do is a canvas mode, which is actually the model outputting some React components or HTML and then displayed to the user in a way that is just a nice artifact. you don't want the model to know that it's code that is being generated underneath. You just want them to see the beautiful output of it.
Yeah.
And so that's typically something that we're using as a underlying model capability that's just powering a cool feature or a cool capability of the product. So I'm just trying to give these examples of things that are kind of separate, where depending on what exactly is the product that you're building, you're either exposing that capability immediately or just trying to hide it because you don't really care that the user understands what's happening underneath.
Gotcha. And so there's a lot of products that, look very magical in the sense of like demos, but they break down when you go into real workflows. What tells you internally that something is ready to become a product and not just, an impressive technology when you're doing a demo, for example?
So, I mean, there's, I think this applies to non-AI products as well. Sometimes you have a nice demo and it just breaks.
True.
It's probably harder with AI because this stochastic or probabilistic nature of the models, and that you can do nice demos quite quickly. But actually, Mistral is working really, I would say, in kind of three modes.
Mm-hmm.
There's science-driven innovations that's coming from the science team, like, okay, new capabilities, new things that are happening.
Yeah.
There's innovations that we as a product engineering team are driving because we're confronted to end users and we're iterating with them. So there, you actually want to ship quickly, see if it works, get user feedback, kind of test ideas. And there's another angle that is actually driving a lot of how we're building product is coming from our work with enterprises. So we do have a lot of forward deployed engineers working hands in hands on hard problems with enterprises. And there, you don't really, there's no option of just doing just a nice demo and just getting away. So it's actually, you need to think about how it's going to work in production from day one. And we have been building a lot of our capabilities out of these engagements. So Forge, something that we released in March, is actually something that came out of a year and a half of working with our customers. Well, it's a training platform for models, so it's not maybe exactly the same idea, but you're not prototyping there. You're actually building models. You're using production training stack. You don't want to have a cluster of GPUs being idle or just failing, so it has to be reliable. We also build Mistral workflows with our customers. I think this ties back to how you're building products that kind of work in production state. Is for these specific things, we actually thought about building inside the product the deterministic rules. And workflows is this like the orchestration layer that can actually help you do that. So yeah, I guess these are different types of answers to the same questions, but for sure, you try something, it works, and then you're actually seeing all the failure modes. You need to test, you need to evaluate, you need to A/B test, so like any other type of products. But I would say that the angles that I was mentioning are actually helpers for us to see, okay, we actually need to make it work from day one.
Yeah, and that's actually how you get products that actually work in a different environment. Again, I think that there's a huge gap between what you're going to see as a product builder or, amateur, let's say, but doing it on your own. And then when you get into the enterprise segment, there's too much to do and too much to plug in. So if you want to get an actual result, you need to make sure that you do control a bunch of it. But as you said, Forge, that is one thing that's very important, having the availability, the option to just train your model and control that section. I think that just makes your let's say context more relevant in the sense that you do control and you adapt it to your actual needs as an enterprise player. One thing, again, like sort of like talking about the enterprise model versus let's say traditional SaaS and PM design workflows or flows. In AI, the product can behave differently every time. So what changes in how you write specs, you define quality, and you make product decisions?
I think a lot stays the same in the sense like the main thing you need to think of when you're doing product is, okay, what are the problems that you're solving? What are the users that you're targeting? And what's the experience that you want to create? And so this stays the same in the sense like whether or not it's AI underneath it, whether or not it's probabilistic, you still need to understand that before doing anything else. But then, first of all, the pace of development, and so the pace of shipping is accelerating. And so I feel like at least at Mistral, engineers are driving a lot of ideas and evolutions. And so on the product side, you can actually focus on a lot of other things, which is I think a nice thing for the product function. You actually have to provide the right framework so that this can actually work very well. So I think that's one of the main thing, aligning the company around just being able to deliver quickly, make sure that sales are enabled in the right way, everything that kind of goes smoothly. But then on how you're actually building the product itself, you and because of what you were saying, like, oh, it can fail in ways you were not expecting.
Yeah.
You have to think about ways to test that in a kind of wide scale manner. Examples that we do is other examples of like, it's going to fail maybe 2% of the time in a certain way, and do something that you really don't want it to do, but you need to have the amount of data to be able to catch these 2%. Which is something that you, whenever you're testing, whenever you're actually having your test cases, you need to think of, actually, I do need a huge amount of these examples, a wide variety of examples to be able to catch that. And then you define thresholds of what's acceptable or not, because it's always going to fail. And so, I mean, under 1% for this specific thing, you can say, okay, this is acceptable. And so you actually need to define, identify some failure modes that are rather classic. It can be, the model doing an infinite loop or something, because this happens. And that's acceptable if it's under, 0.5% of cases. And then you have to think about how the system, the product is going to fail gracefully. I think it applies to everything else, but since you can't really predict what's going to fail, you still just have to say, okay, you don't just say, oh, this is a random error. You actually need to provide that. And so going back to how do you build your, what does the product manager do? There's still some level of specking or high level specking, some level of vision to provide where we're going, and then there's this question of actually the interface between the product and the science is more evaluations, and so evaluations are about defining golden examples and bad examples. And instead of just saying this is good, this is bad, you also have to think about how a model is going to judge the output. And so thinking about grading notes, or what good looks like, it's not, it has to be A or B. It's a good looks like, if the model says this and this and this, if it's this, so you actually change creating evaluation changes a bit how you're thinking about specifications. It's not a mock-up. It's okay, this is the kind of tone I want. This is the kind of behavior I'm looking for. And I have to provide examples that will help the model kind of understand where it's good and where it's bad.
Do you think evals are is a task that should be technical, meaning like the engineers should take that into account, or is it something that actually product people should definitely do at some point? Because I feel from what you said, I feel like the fact of doing this actually gives you some critical sense of what you're trying to get, again, the output, and how do you judge that. So I'm wondering if you see this as a purely tech thing or something that should be done, like, regardless of the job desk, let's say.
I think it should be done regardless of the job desk. I mean, at Mistral, we have a lot of people doing evals, but we have model behavior architects that work very closely with science, who are actually, the ones, and they're not engineers, not all the time engineers, but they're sometimes they're working on the tone. And so it's like, okay, I need to understand what's the tone or the thought process. And you don't need to be super technical to do that. You actually need to go and look at a lot of examples, look at the data, and kind of get an intuition of what works, what doesn't work, what's good, what's not good. And this can be done by pretty much anyone. And I would encourage all PMs working on AI products to go and look at what's happening, because you can test, you can get a sense of whenever you're doing things, but you will never see what the other users are actually writing down or how they're thinking about their tasks. And you would not see the failure cases that happen when they kind of prompt it in a very different way that you would think of. So looking at the data, thinking, getting like a strong intuition at what good look like and what bad looks like is, I think, super important for everyone. For us at Mistral, this is coming again, going back to how we operate. We are creating evaluations from our engagement with customers, in the sense, like in the enterprise context, we're seeing either capabilities that are missing or failure cases that are kind of specific or unique to these enterprises. And we need to define that interface between, okay, these are failure modes, this needs to be fixed on the science side. There's no other way of actually creating an eval. Like if you do the eval, it's quantified, it's qualified, you have examples, the science team can work with that. Just saying, oh, the model doesn't work when this is not enough, and will not help solve the problem. And similarly, when you're thinking about product capabilities, you want the model to do this. You can't do more. You can say it, but if you really want it to work, you need to build that evaluation. And so, yeah, I guess evals are really core.
I know that a lot of companies, we were discussing this just a little before, a lot of companies still see AI as you choose a model and then you talk to a chatbot or a chat interface. What do you think they misunderstand about what it takes to, create lasting value in enterprise?
I think that, and I'm going to take that angle, is that when you're looking at the consumer world, and I think AI started with that, it seems easy, right? As you were mentioning, ChatGPT came out. It was a chatbot. You can use it. Everyone can use it. It's easy. It's simple. More recently, you have these kind of agents such as OpenClaw or Hermes that go viral in a weekend, and you have all these people saying, "Oh, I do run a bunch of them on my laptops," and you have this impression that okay, so everyone is doing that. It's bringing a lot of value, etc. The reality is that in enterprises, it's very different. You can't have that happening because what happens if someone does that on their laptop from their work laptop is that you install a vulnerability that leaks all the secrets or whatever, and then you have a cybersecurity threat, or you just have the model doing something that's completely random and that compromises your customer support operations. So you need to think about these things very differently. And I think that most of the customers that we're working with have already operated this shift. 3 or 4 years ago, when it was the beginning of this Gen AI area, enterprises' use cases were about, oh, I want RAG, or I want a chatbot that connects to that enterprise knowledge. Most of the engagements that we have today are on other problems. Maybe it's because Mistral has been kind of tackling these very hard, complex, mission-critical topics or business transformation topics, but it's not about having someone even sometimes talking to the AI. It's about automating entire business processes. It's about integrating into the systems, and sometimes it's just back-end stuff happening. So there's not even an interaction, or there's very few interactions point with end users. And so our customers, I feel, have kind of understood that. We're even working with some of our biggest customers on, defining new models with new modalities, or how you accelerate engineering for a manufacturing company. And these problems are very, very far from being chatbots or being even UI oriented. They're about what does the science can bring to your unique problems, and how can you solve them with this kind of a new technology. I think this is really cool. But again, it's really other types of problems that we had there. I'm not saying we're only doing that. I'm just saying that, a lot of what we're doing with our customers is around these kinds of core transformation or really hard problems. And so we're actually very far from these initial use cases that were there a couple of years ago.
So I know there's been, as you said, like there was the keynote, and then you announced a whole bunch of things being full stack. You had Vibe, Forge, Studio, right? And Studio seems to be where the connections, the workflows, the permissions, governance, like company-specific contexts come together. From a product perspective, how do you make control powerful without making the experience heavy?
So a couple of angles to that answer. The first, I think, is that we're trying to redefine what this kind of acceptable governance looks like. And let me just be very specific and give an example. Is I think a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago, you would see very few developers use the YOLO mode of their coding agents.
Yeah.
Because they were afraid of what was happening and the models were not reliable enough, and they would just accept things. And so you actually had a very, synchronous mode of interaction with that. I'm talking about developers because I think that it is where the adoption is getting the most, it's going quicker on the adoption layer, and we're seeing some usage patterns today that are moving really, really away from these synchronous mode. And you just say, okay, now I give all the power to the agent. I just say, do that. It does whatever they want. It can work for hours if that needs to be. It needs to be, and then I just review the output, or even I have another LLM reviewing the output. And unless there's something critical there,
that does some
I accept.
QA. Yeah.
And so we've kind of moved away from that because the value that this represents for the developer is actually so big that it abstracts away the fear, or it just the ROI of all these things is kind of positive. You still need to put some safety nets or security aspects. So usually what you do is actually the agent is not running on your laptop, but it's running in a controlled sandbox, which is, I think, where it's going. It's like putting that, security layer into a way that is not the concern of the user. But this was just an example to say that mindsets are shifting as well. And I think that we'll have to reimagine what it means to trust AI for specific use cases, and how you push that boundary of just putting all these, safety nets, and just saying, okay, I actually let go a bit because the value that it can bring, it brings like a lot of things. That's one aspect to the answer. The second, which I would say is more classic, is in the end, when you're working in an enterprise, usually the people who are actually thinking about these governance things and controls are not the same as the end users.
Yeah.
And so it's probably most on their end that we need to, we're working with them, understanding, okay, what does it take for you to actually deploy Vibe, for example? What are the conditions that are going to be needed so that you can trust end users using that? And so it's working with them, trying to define, the allowed connectors or MCP servers, putting in the right policies of this does not need to happen with this. Example of customers asking us, like, for their very sensitive information, you should never have them go outside of their network, and so you cannot do a web search at the same time that you're working with that knowledge layer. And so you need to put that level of policies in place. And so in the end, the end users doesn't really know what's happening, and this is what we're targeting. They just can't do it, but they don't have to worry about it. It's been the concern of someone else. And so it's true that this is where we're going with Studio, like thinking about these sandbox controlled environments, these set of tools and connectors the model can work with, potentially putting hooks in in some aspects of where the agent, the harness is going to be working with, so that you can stop things at the right level, and the user needs to know that it's been stopped for security reasons, but they don't need to have they don't have to worry about what's going to happen. And I guess this is the key thing to not impact experience is end users should not worry too much about that. It is actually the concern of other people, at least in the enterprise world.
Yeah, makes sense. And so on the other side, you have Forge. That's really about adapting models to, the company's data, the old systems, internal language, and specific workflows. How do you draw the line between, a scalable product and custom work for just like one customer, as you said?
Yeah, Forge is a good example of that, because Forge came out of work with customers. So it was really something we started 1.5 years ago with a specific set of customers. They wanted to either add new languages to their models, understand how models were trained. And what we did was we took essentially the code base of our science team, we adapted it in a way that was portable to customers, and we started kind of co-building these models with our customers. Yeah. And after a couple of months, so this was custom work in the sense. And then after a couple of months, we actually saw that, okay, there's a big value proposition in providing training tools to customers.
Yeah.
But I have to admit that for now, we're still at this stage. If training models is really hard, you actually need to build these evaluations, understand how the data is going to be used, and it's not really something that a lot of customers can do themselves. So we're still in this mode where we're building the tools to do that. So this is something completely, I would say, non-custom. It's like, this is how you optimize your GPUs. This is how you do training loops. This is proven recipes of how you do reinforcement learning. But a lot of what makes a good model in the end is this knowledge or this, intuition that scientists have. And this, we're still working hands in hands with customers and actually delivering that value. So there's a lot of things happening with us. And I think as the film matures, these things either can be put into proven recipes, what I'm saying, like, data pipelines that transform a repository into a good RL environment. And maybe this you can completely automate. And other things, there's like, building models from scratch. This is always going to require science and craft. So for Forge, I think that this applies in a very, very different manner, which is the product itself, Forge, is a product. There's no customization, or you just provide SDKs that can help the customers, put the right parameters or whatever. And then there's building models is something very different. It's not just about the training tools. It's about understanding how you train these models. And in some cases, for the hardest like model creation, you actually need to work hand in hand with the customer.
I gotcha. If you were to take back on the PM role, when the product is a model, what's actually different about being head of product at Mistral compared to being a product leader in a let's say more traditional SaaS company?
Being head of product at Mistral has been an amazing journey. I don't know if I would have lived that in another company. I mean, I joined Mistral end of 2024. It was more or less the beginning of the product journey. There was already we were a handful of PMs then. And so what I've seen in the last year and a half has been truly amazing, and I'm actually super proud of the teams, of the launch that was done last week.
Yeah.
And I think that level of growth, is really something that only happens in a couple of handfuls of startups today, probably linked to this AI space, right? Then more specifically, the difference, Mistral has this 3 oriented angles when you're thinking about product. As I was mentioning, there's like the science-driven innovations that you need to think of, how you work with science. This is kind of unique because like creating that collaboration layer between product, customer problems, and the science team actually needs to, you need to revisit a little bit how you're thinking about things. And then we're building products just as Vibe, which are very SaaS oriented in the sense that, while you're delivering products, you're seeing what happens with real users. You have to look at the data. You have to build these evaluations, as I was mentioning. But in the end, it's like, it's actually, I'm following my North Star metrics. I need to improve this, etc. And the third pillar, which is we're working with enterprises and with this forward deployed engineer motion, which is, I think, as well very unique to Mistral. There's not a lot of companies that have been doing that. And that's a pretty exciting challenge as well, because you are facing completely, you have to deep dive into material physics with some customers, or you have to think about crash tests with another. Like, these are the different problems that we're solving, or technical drawings with others. And so it's not about building custom products. It's about thinking, how do you enable these very, very different realities into something that is a core platform. And so again, a lot of the innovation that is being brought by these engagements is coming from our forward deployed engineers working with the customers. And what the product team is doing there is, okay, this workflow capability, for example, I was mentioning before, is going to enable all these types of use cases. Let's do a core platform out of that. And since we're doing this in a manner which needs a lot of customization, the way that we're thinking about the product is we need to have these really well thought points where anyone can customize these areas. And so it's not about building custom products, it's about building configurable or customizable products. And that's why on Mistral we have a lot, on Studio specifically, we've thought about it, building it really developer first, code oriented first, because that's what enables powerful applications being built with it. And not, this drag and drop workflow builder that a lot of people have been building. While this, you can do it quickly, it covers a lot of users, but this will never enable this mission critical stuff that we have at enterprises. And so it can seem more complex because you need to code, you need to understand the underlying tech, but it's so much more powerful. And what we're doing now is like going up. And so now that we have the powerful backend, let's say, you can start putting this kind of low code layer on top that will enable really more simple use cases.
So to close the loop, because we've talked about roadmaps at the beginning of the episode, and how do roadmaps work when the model can unlock something unexpected, versus when a capability looks exciting, but that is not necessarily reliable enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was mentioning as well at the beginning, it's like, the roadmap is essentially, okay, you're building in the next 3 months, right? The science iteration cycles are getting shorter, but still it's like a new model gets trained in maybe 3 to 4 months. So you still kind of operate under the assumptions of the 3-4 months, and you need to think ahead about, maybe I will not optimize that skill or prompt, or spend hours and days and like tweaking the prompt, because we know that the model tomorrow is just going to fix it.
Yeah.
And so you need to think about not over engineering things at that layer when the science is actually going to fix it. You still need to have that right level of performance for your end users today, but you need to balance the investments that you're making now versus what's going to happen in the future. And it's not an easy task, but there are some things we know it's just going to get better. I mean, things, for example, which is a couple of months ago, having models like, iterate with a lot of different tools was not that trivial. Not a lot of models were doing that, or they weren't doing it very well. But we knew that because we were having some efforts on training agentic models and training agentic capabilities, this was going to happen. And so you just invest in something else in the meantime that the model is able to do it, or but you don't kind of over-engineer the fact that, okay, I'm going to put some stitches around that so that it works, because then you're a little bit wasting cycles.
Mm-hmm. And so today, what kind of product judgment, let's say, matters the most in AI? Is it technical depth, user empathy, taste, risk management, or something really else entirely?
I think taste matters still a lot, and I do believe that at least for the products that we're building at Mistral, technical depth is quite important. Product managers need to understand the underlying tech, what's happening, so that they can kind of think about what to build next. So this kind of taste mixed with understanding what's happening in the AI field, but understanding it really well, demystifying things, etc. I think is like core needs. And then because of project, like the PM sometimes can be project managers. I don't think this is important, because again, shipping new features is happening more quickly, etc. But like this subject matter expertise that you might have for specific problems, specific customers, again, still realize, because this is helping you get the right taste, or at least the right intuitions of what to build.
Well, honestly, there's some things that you said that really opened my mind about a bunch of topics. Maybe to wrap things up, I've prepared some rapid fire questions for you. So yeah, feel free to tell me what you think. What's one AI product that you use daily that's not Mistral?
Yeah, so we use some tools at Mistral, and sometimes AI is kind of built in that tool.
Yeah.
I'm thinking example of Notion, and so I sometimes use the Notion AI just because it's easy, it's there.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, the one I'm thinking top of mind.
Yeah, cool. What's the most underrated skill for a PM working in AI?
As I was mentioning, like data, looking into data, and just doing that work of like looking, going in depth to do that.
What's one belief about product that you've totally flipped on in the last 2 years?
This is easy. The fact that you stop planning ahead too much. Think about the big picture, but then focus on the next 3 months.
That's one thing that I love. Ship fast and break, or ship slow and polish at an AI lab?
This one is a tricky one. I want to say it's a bit of both. I would say it's a bit of both, because you can ship and break with customers that have,
for the enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course. All right. Thank you so much for all the great insight. There's a lot of things that you said that honestly makes me want to work for Mistral, and that have really opened my mind about what it's like to actually work for, a frontier AI company. So it's super interesting. Thank you so much for the insight, and I'll leave, of course, like all of your LinkedIn and everything, so people can get in touch with you. And I highly encourage people to go and check Mistral out. And that's it for this episode. I want to say a huge thank you to Elisa for taking the time to have this conversation. And of course, thank you to Mistral for making it possible. What I loved about this discussion is that it really goes beyond the usual AI headlines. We're not just talking about models, benchmarks, or demos. We're actually talking about what it actually takes to turn frontier AI into products people can use, trust, and build with. And I think that's one of the most important questions for product people today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who's thinking seriously about AI, product, and the future of work. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. So what part of this conversation made you rethink about how AI products should be built? Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.